and thanks again for watching Now You Know. I'm Dale Wilson for Papa Television. We've been doing a bit of political reporting, as some of you know, and we're getting some feedback, some wonderful feedback from our viewers, and they've sent in some questions that I'm going to attempt to answer here, and they are reflective of the political shows we've already done. So getting right to the questions from viewers like you, first one says, many are saying young supporters are voting for Bernie Sanders because he is going to make college less expensive. Some even say they are freeloaders. What do you think of this? Well, you know, I had the good fortune to get a good education. Now, I had to work hard for it. Most of the time I was in school, I worked 2 or 3 jobs. And this is not uncommon, or wasn't uncommon back in the day. In my opinion, college should be as close to free as possible because these are the students, these are the workers who are going to go out and be paying the taxes, paying the freight for the upkeep and maintenance of our country for the next 50, 75, 100 years. So education is the most important investment we can make in our young people, and to consider people that want to go out and get a free education as freeloaders, don't believe a word of it, because college study is rigorous, it requires discipline, and it requires you to put everything that you've got into it. So I don't consider anybody that's working that hard to get an education as freeloaders, and I certainly don't think that the popularity of Bernie Sanders is contingent upon the fact that he's going to make college free. He's also suggested that we make health care free, and it should be a right of birth and a right of citizenship to get a good education and to have your medical care taken care of. So I certainly don't think that there's anything freeloading about it, and I don't think that that is the popular appeal of Bernie Sanders. There are so many more things in his candidacy that I think makes him a good candidate for president. And another question came in, says this, Bernie says that he's a democratic socialist. What is a democratic socialist? You know, I think you could ask a great number of people that question and get a great variety of answers. I'll give you one opinion of it. Democratic socialist is the concept that some problems in a society are too large for individuals to solve by themselves, and so those situations, those problems need to be confronted by a government. And the government has to be pretty large to provide a defense for the country. I don't think that the Minuteman, militiamen model is going to work in this day and time. I don't think that just because everybody has a rifle in their closet, if we get invaded by a foreign power, I don't think that they're going to rush to the border or rush to the coast and put up a defense. So you have to have a government that is going to provide a common defense. Education. In the old days, every parent was responsible for the education of the children, and when they would get together in small communities, they would hire a school teacher to come in, and sometimes they would teach all 12 grades. One person would teach all 12 grades in the same room. So that's too big of a problem for a small community to settle, so government has to take on a part of that load. Democratic socialism means bringing the government in to handle the bigger problems that a small community cannot. Now, as you know, in some of the European countries, they have from kindergarten to your graduate degree is all paid for. Now, admittedly, this requires more taxes, but if you get more people better educated, better prepared for better jobs, they're going to make more money. So there will be more money to be paid into taxes to cover these. So democratic socialism merely means that the government or the state will help solve some of the intractable problems that are not easily solved by individuals or even small communities. Who are the best candidates on each side? Well, now we're down to only 2 candidates on the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Who's the best candidate for the Democrats? It depends. As you know, Hillary Clinton has been around the public scene for quite a long time. She's probably one of the best prepared policy wonks that we've ever had running for president. And I'm sure she has a binder for every problem that might come up. But she has this trust issue. Going all the way back to land deals in Arkansas, there's a lot of things that cause people to wonder if Hillary Clinton is trustworthy, if what she says on the campaign trail will come to pass, if she made it to the White House. And that is going to be dependent on a person's knowledge and how long they have been watching Hillary and how closely they've been watching Hillary. So Hillary is a great candidate when it comes to policy and how to get things done. How she would fare in the White House with a Republican Congress leaves a lot to be known. As you know, the House and the Senate has been obstructive with a lot of the policies that Obama wanted to get passed into law. In fact, it has been the most obstructive Congress in my lifetime. Congressional approval rating in polls now is in the 12, 15, 20%. And when you think about how much we put onto Congress, how much we expect out of Congress, for them to have an approval rating of that small a percentage makes it very difficult for whomever is the candidate that comes in to take over after Obama is out of office. So we have two great candidates on the Democratic side. Hillary is knowledgeable about all of the issues that might come to pass. She has a trust factor. Bernie Sanders has been a fighter for the common man, for the blue-collar worker ever since he was mayor of a city in Vermont. They know about him. I think people that Bernie has the trust factor nailed down. He's been exactly the same, been fighting for the same set of problems to solve ever since he started back 20 years, 30 years ago. I don't know how long it's been. So Bernie has a trust factor. Whether he can get elected is another question. Whether he can get anything done with a Republican Congress is another question. So I think we have two fine candidates. I think it's going to be up to the voters to decide who is the best candidate, and I think that'll be decided in the November election. Another question coming in from viewers says, why do older voters see education as such a low priority? Well, I'm going to be a little cynical on this and suggest that most of your older voters already have their children educated, and now they are having to pay taxes to educate somebody else's kids. And they may be losing sight of the fact that whomever we educate, these are the people that are going to make decisions that affect our lives for our sunset years. So these are the kids that are going to determine how nursing homes are going to be regulated. They're going to determine what medicines are going to be available to you, and they're going to be deciding a lot of things that are going to affect you even as you get older and are less able to take care of yourself. So, I think that is a small priority of older people who poo-poo the importance of education. Anybody who is educated, I think, fully appreciates it, and I don't necessarily think that this is the case, but anybody who does not think that education is important now as it was when they were being educated didn't get as good an education as they may have paid for. Another question from viewers, why is Trump doing so well? You know, I think Donald Trump has latched on to the dissatisfaction and overriding angst that people have with the establishment politics. Again, I've talked about the congressional approval rating being down in the 12, 15, 20% range. That means 80% disapprove of Congress. So there are a lot of people out there who are seeing how politics is operating, see how it's benefiting their lives or failing to benefit their lives. They see just an ongoing tug of war between regulation and business that don't want to be regulated. They see an ongoing tug of war between banks that need to be regulated, or we have another meltdown, and the banks that don't want to be regulated think that, you know, we can pull ourselves out of any problems we get ourselves into, except that big 70-something billion dollar bailout that we gave them. So why is Trump doing so well? He's tapped into an overriding angst that's in the body politic now, and he's liable to ride it all the way into the nomination and maybe into the White House. So those of us who wrote Trump off in the early days are taking a new look and are reformulating our opinion, because right now, after several victories in the primaries and the caucuses, Trump could go all the way, and it might be a good idea to either get on the bandwagon to support him or get on the bandwagon to promote and support another candidate if you don't like where Trump is taking this country. Another one, is this a good pick of candidates? Well, It's hard to say what is a good pick of candidates because every election cycle brings its own problems, brings its own opportunities, and candidates present themselves. They are the ones who decide that they are the best person at the time, and that's why we have the winnowing out process that these primaries and these caucuses give us an opportunity for people to weigh in, decide for themselves, is this a good block of candidates? My hat's off to all of them who have decided to get into the fray and to put themselves and their families through such an incredible primary and caucus season, and it takes a lot out of you, it takes a lot of investment. Another good question from viewers at home asking, what is the hardest part of being a journalist? Well, the preparation is the hardest part, I think, and getting the interview is a hard part. Becoming knowledgeable about the person or the topic that you're going to be reporting on is a very difficult part. Probably one of the most difficult parts is getting the job as a journalist. Being able to work at when I first got into this business, it was during the Watergate era when Bernstein and Woodward were making all the headlines, doing all of these wonderful, wonderful stories on Watergate, which finally culminated in the ouster or the resignation of a president. So, and you wouldn't believe how many people signed up for journalism school as a result of the reporting done by Woodward and Bernstein for the Washington Post. So the hardest part about being a journalist is being able to figure out what the story is, what background information you need to go out and cover the story, whom to get involved and who to interview to get the right questions or right answers to your questions. But I'll go on and stretch that question just a little bit. What is one of the best attributes to being a journalist? And I've asked myself that, and I've asked a lot of other knowledgeable people that, and I think we all agree that having a great curiosity is one of the most important aspects of a journalist. When you see something out of the ordinary and it causes a question in your mind, it might be worth turning back and taking another look at it to see if it does fit the criteria for a good story. And a lot of these stories are just stumbled upon. A lot of the best stories are not assigned by an editor, but a journalist will go out and in his normal day-to-day situation will be able to find a story, get the information, find out who he needs to interview, and get the interview and get a good story together. So curiosity is one of the best attributes of a reporter. The difficult part is being able to tell a good story from a bad before you spend too much time on a bad story. Okay, another one. How long have you been reporting? Well, off and on since I think I gave it away with the Watergate story. I started being a student of journalism. I was a page in the legislature at the Tennessee General Assembly in my senior year in high school. During that time, we would come in at 8 o'clock in the morning, but the legislators would not arrive until noon. So once we got our collating and distribution of bills and things that had to be acted on that day, and that would take us a couple of hours. So now I have a couple of hours with hardly anything to do. So I would go around to each of the desks of the representatives and the senators, and I would grab and then the hometown newspapers would always have the daily paper delivered to their desk. So I would go around, prop up my feet on the desk and read their hometown newspapers, and so I became very interested in all the minutiae, all the stories, all of the different things that were going on around the state that were covered by a local press. So that made me appreciate two things. Number one, the enormous number of stories that are going on out there that may never reach a statewide newspaper and certainly never reach a national newspaper, but were very, very important to the hometown people. In fact, Warren Buffett recently, one of the richest men in America, recently bought a chain of newspapers. One of his advisors said, "Warren, what are you doing? Newspapers are dying. Why are you buying a chain of newspapers?" And he said, "Yes, national newspapers are dying, but local news is on the uptick. And as long as you keep your stories and your concentration on local stories, I think you'll be fine." And turns out he was right, because the newspapers that he bought are still doing very well, and they're still covering the local scene. Have you ever written an article that people did not like or agree with? Yes, often. And in fact, some journalists would say that you're not doing a good job unless at least half the people are mad at you, and you hope it's not the same half every story. So yes, a journalist is not out there to win friends, but perhaps they are out there to influence people, because they are bringing stories to light that need to be, or at least they think need to be put out into public consumption, and the feedback will let them know if that was a good story, if they agreed with it, and the feedback will let them know if it was a bad story and they failed to agree with it. But I think that you're going to have, and especially as divided as this country is now, I think there's almost going to be a guaranteed 40 to 45% that are going to come down on either side of the political divide. And I think it's going to be the same way with journalism. You're going to have a certain number of people that like everything you do. You're going to have a certain number of people that dislike everything you do. And I think journalists could spend some time working on that silent middle that can be won over by the right story and, of course, lost by the wrong story. So yes, I think journalists ought to be sure and try to get the facts, get it in a readable manner, and keep getting the story out, and take the risk of being disagreed with and take the risk of being disliked, because the next story that you put out may change everything. And the next one, what's the best part about doing your job? I think that's the people that you get to meet, and the stories that you get to tell, and the stories that you find out about that you would never have found out about had you not been in the journalism arena. Some of the most important people I've ever met in my life came to me because I was interviewing them for a story. Some of the most influential people that I've ever met came to me because I was covering a story or writing a story about something that happened in their lives. So I think the most important part, or the most enjoyable part about a journalist, is the people that you meet. Another question, how much does religion play in politics? Well, as you know, all of the candidates are out there attempting to get the evangelicals on their side. So I'm sure that at least the politicians, the candidates, believe that religion is a very, very, very important part of the political decisions. Now, I do not think that I do not think that religion plays nearly as big a part in politics as it did even when I was in high school and in the early part of my college age. Religion is a very, very important part of the daily life of a lot of people, but probably not as many people as you would think. But now again, it may be that the evangelicals are more politically active and the people who are not religious are also not politically active. That's for somebody much wiser than I to determine. But I do believe that religion plays an important part in people's lives. Whether it plays as important part in the politics, we don't know. As you know, there's supposed to be a wall separating the state and religion. That very seldom works very well. It's a very permeable wall, because I think probably every congressional meeting begins with a prayer. Almost every civic meeting begins with a prayer. Our Pledge of Allegiance talks about one nation under God. So religion permeates the political perspective, but I'm sure it has varying degrees of importance in people's lives. And I should also say that if your religion predicates your politics, then you're going to have a very narrow frame of focus, because there probably are some people out there that would be very good leaders that are not very religious. But there are also some very good religious leaders who have been very effective in politics. So religion is very important to the people who are in politics. I'm not sure how important it is to the majority of voters. Okay, next question from one of our viewers, and that's why we're doing this at Peninsula Area Public Access. We want you to get involved and send us the questions. We may not come up with the answers, but we will certainly attempt to get the answers for the questions that you let us know are of interest to you. So the next question is, why do good people go bad when they get elected? Well, thankfully not all of them do, but you're right, there's a lot of people that do get their head turned when they get elected, and they start rubbing noses with all of these people who want to influence them. And then they are tempted with money and power and sex and all of those things that can cause a good person to go bad. So that's why you want to be sure and elect the right person going in, to be sure that they have the character and the integrity to be able to stand tall and stand strong against those corrupting influences. Some of you may remember Gary Hart, who was very likely would have been the President of the United States in 1988, I think it was. except that he got a photograph taken of him with a young lady on his knee who was not his wife, and he was on a boat called Monkey Business somewhere in the Bahamas, and as soon as that paper was published, he went back to Denver and closed his office and got out of the presidential race, and threw a lot of people out of business. All of his campaign was suddenly thrown out of work, and the entire '88 election was thrown into turmoil because this one person could not keep from bending to the temptations of money and power and influence. Edwin Edwards was another longtime governor of Louisiana. In fact, he was a three-term governor. When he was running for election for his third term, a young reporter probably was not even born the first time that Edwin Edwards ran for an office, and he asked him, "Governor, what are your chances for re-election this time?" And Governor Edwards told him, said, "Why, boy, the only way I could not get elected is if I got caught in bed with a live boy or a dead girl." And sure enough, he was reelected the next week, but before he finished that term, he was in prison for selling licenses for casinos. So some people get by with it for a long time. Some people yield early and are disgraced early. It's hard to say why good people go bad, but the best thing I can think of is because they don't have the intestinal fortitude to remain strong after they are actually tempted with power and money and influence. Another good question back to journalism: how do you know when a source is being truthful? Well, you never know, because there are always people who are attempting to get a story out, or to hurt somebody with a story, or to damage somebody else, maybe a business rival, maybe a love rival. There may be several different things going in there. And so a good journalist will not go to press with a story unless he has at least two, and even better, three sources that confirm the premise of the story that you're putting out. So if you go to press with just one source, you're asking for trouble. Two sources, it's a little bit better, but you need to have at least two sources, hopefully three. Now, oftentimes you can get somebody who will go into what they call deep background, where they can give you the information that you need, but they can't go on record for job considerations, for personal reasons that they may not want to go on record. It might blow up their entire lifetime or lifestyle if they were to go on record and be the one that was noted as the one gave you the story. But they can give you the story, and then they can tell you who can go on record and verify that story. And so now you've got the background information, and you know somebody that you can go and talk to who can go on record and put their name to the story. And then that's still only one. You still need somebody else to go on record to make sure that you have the central part of the story and the facts that are going to be good and true and just to all concerned. And also, there's always a competition, especially in markets where you've got more than one news media. You get a little bit of a story, and you want to get the scoop. You want to get to the press or get to the airwaves just as quick as you can. And sometimes you get a little sloppy because you're afraid that one of the other media properties is going to get the story and get it to air before you do. But I'll tell you this: it's much more important to be accurate than it is to be first. Because if you're first and you're inaccurate, you're going to spend more time walking that story back and taking the egg off your face than you will if you spend a little extra time getting more. Even if somebody gets the story out there first, you can get a better story, you can get a more complete story, you can get more facts to the story, and yours may still be the one that's quoted even more than the one that got to the people first. What do you see as the future of the Republican Party if Trump is elected? That's a good question. I think it's been said by people smarter than me that nobody could have done any more to destroy the Republican Party than Donald Trump, and he's supposed to be a Republican. Now, also you'll see newsreels that go back several years to where Donald Trump is espousing some very liberal, some very democratic philosophies. I think you'll see many times where he's contributed to Democratic office candidates. So if somebody were to hold a gun to my head and say, is Donald Trump a Democrat or a Republican, I would be hard fit to tell you which I actually believe that he is. I will say this, that no Democrat could have done as much it's almost like Sherman's March to the Sea. the way he has decimated the Republican candidates in this race. And it's, I think Ronald Reagan came up with the 13th commandment, and that is that you never say anything bad about another fellow Republican candidate. Well, Donald Trump has completely destroyed that notion, because he has said, Jeb Bush was low energy, Cruz is a liar, Rubio is a robot. Now that was Governor Chris Christie who suggested that Rubio was a robot. But what will become of the Republican Party? Well, it has almost gone off the rails even without him being elected. Well, first of all, you start out with 17 candidates, and then a lot of them stayed on much longer than the public could understand why they were staying in. When they were getting 1%, 2%, 3% in the polls, I don't know why they continue to put their families and their finances through that sort of punishment. But now we're down to, I don't even know how many candidates we're down to now, but they are having to elbow each other out of the way to get even anywhere close to the limelight that Donald Trump seems to enjoy just by showing up. The other thing, all of these other candidates besides Donald Trump have to pay dearly for camera time. Donald Trump can just show up for a meal at a restaurant, and the throngs of reporters will be there, and they'll let you know everything from what color was his tie to what he had for dinner, who was with him, and this sort of thing. So he's getting the benefit of all of this free publicity that the other candidates have to pay for. So all of that rolled into one, it's really going to cause people to take another look at how party politics is done. And I don't think that the Republican National Committee will ever allow that many candidates to get into the fray again, but those are decided at levels that I will never reach. So what is Trump's candidacy done to the Republican Party? It has nearly decimated it. But then you're going to have a chance to jump on the Democrats too soon enough. So it'll be interesting to see what the entire prospect of politics is by the time Donald Trump gets through with his march to the nomination or to the White House. Now, those are the questions that we have from viewers like you, and I certainly hope that you will send us more. You can email to info@papaonline.tv. You can call us, and my number is 477-2484. So if you have questions for this program, now you know, please do give us a call, send us an email, send us a tweet. Actually, we don't do tweets, so scratch that. Anyway, we're anxious to get your questions. We're anxious to answer your questions as best we can, and we really appreciate your interacting with Papa and Peninsula Area Public Access. My name is Dale Wilson. I'm the host of Now You Know. We'll be back soon with another episode, and I do hope you'll tune in then. Thanks from everybody at Papa.